Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Wednesday evening to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there and having yourselves a great ending to your day and a great week out there so far. Got you an update on what's going on weather-wise throughout the rest of the work week. We're also going to talk on what's kind of going on right now out there, as there's been some interesting changes throughout the day on the southern end of this severe weather mode. And of course, some of this information that you're going to be watching is going to be old, but I definitely want to talk on what could potentially happen over the next few hours, because this could affect areas like Oklahoma City, some higher populated areas in the state of Oklahoma, which I know Oklahoma has some smaller populated areas, but there is some bigger towns, bigger communities like the Oklahoma City area and surrounding regions. So we need to talk about that, what these storms mean, and then we'll talk on what potentially could happen tomorrow and then Friday, and then talk a little bit about the weekend and what it means for like Virginia, the Carolinas. There's been some chatter about the potential for severe weather events in the Mid-Atlantic and maybe the Carolinas for Saturday, and I'll kind of give you the updated information on that. But with that being said, if you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below so I can pray over it and so others can do so too. Storm Prediction Center between now and tomorrow morning. So this is right now. We had that very small slight risk down here. And this is because you also have a 2% risk of a tornado. I'm sorry, a 5% risk of a tornado in this area and also in this area. So it's kind of a bimodal 5% risk area. One up here, one down here, and you actually have two tornado watches in those areas. Not tornado warnings, tornado watches, where conditions are certainly favorable, could potentially become more favorable for tornadoes. And we'll talk about who is under those tornado watches here in a second as of right now. But you got these two 5% risks between now and tomorrow morning. You got the damaging wind threat, which is up here. I think a big time damaging wind threat could develop. This has actually increased since this morning in the region right here. You got a 30% risk of damaging winds pushing 50 knots or higher. That's 55 to 60 miles per hour. And also a 10% risk in the black outlined area of winds pushing 65 knots or higher. That is hurricane force winds generally. So definitely a damaging wind threat that could potentially really develop here in the next few hours. And then the hail threat. You got the 15% risk down here, and then a 15% risk up here with also a 30% risk. And that is a risk of 1 inch of diameter or larger hail. And the hatch risk, which includes the black outlined areas and with the black dashes going in between it that you see on your screen, that is a hatch risk. So that means you also have a 10% risk of significant hail, which is 2 inch of diameter or larger. And you've already had hail reports down here where the cap has broke. And we've talked about that. Let's go on and jump right to that. So if you're wondering where we're at, this is the Southern Plains. This is Texas. It has Texas outlined. This is Oklahoma. I think most people who just know a basic amount about geography kind of know where we are right now. But you can see the cumulus field right here that bubbles up, and then these big areas right here that are more wider and wider on your screen. That is where storms have exploded through that cap. And if you're wondering what the cap is, we can actually, discuss it a little bit better. This is the desert Southwest over here. This isn't necessarily the desert in New Mexico, but you can actually tell with the vegetation changes. It's more green over here. It's more brown over here. And that's really due to the fact that, well, you have less trees, and two, and two, you are under drought conditions. So all this warm, dry, and stable air, dry air definitely indicates more stable air, kind of overcuts the atmosphere above our heads, and that is what creates this cap. Storm development and cumulus clouds, as they build, as their updrafts try to get going and take advantage of all the atmospheric players at bay right out here. They hit that stable, dry desert air to what we call an EML, which is an elevated mixed layer, and that is what we've been talking about so much, but they have broke through. Okay, and in fact, you look at the radar right now, look how these storms just explode, and they are exploding, and like we were not expecting this much thunderstorm development. And here we are. You got a severe thunderstorm moving over the Oklahoma City area right now. These storms are already producing a lot of hail. You got reports of dime-size hail in areas, pea-size hail, half-inch size hail. So you're already getting a lot of reports of hail. I would say the soundings support a large hail threat, but as we move a little bit later in the evening, there could be more of a tornado threat that gets going. These storms will only help to moisten that dry air up in the upper layers of the atmosphere. But we were not expecting the cap to break this early and to break this much. But somebody asked a good question about an hour ago on my comments. They say, Mitch, you know, how does the cap break? Well, a lot of times it breaks just because you have storms that continue to keep bubbling up and hitting that area of that dry, stable, warm air. And it's like somebody keeps knocking on it, and finally it breaks through. And when it breaks through that cap, it causes a chain reaction. And a lot of times it just causes like just a huge barrage of storms to get going. It happens here in South Carolina, the Carolinas, and the Southeast all the time. You got a lot of warm air at the surface and aloft. And sometimes those storms just explode, and all of a sudden you just have a mass of strong to severe storms and a flash flooding threat. You go from dry, hot, 95 degrees, and all of a sudden it's like 75 degrees, and it's raining 3 inches. It's done rain 3 inches at your house, and that's how it is here in the Southeast all the time. And sometimes it happens on those days where there's something like a 20-30% chance of rain. It's just weird, and that is the cap breaking. That's an example in the Southeast, but tornado watch up here for the northern mode of this. This does include Omaha and all these other communities, Topeka, almost to Des Moines, but not quite. This includes all these counties in yellow. A few tornadoes are possible, and this is up till 11 p.m. Central Time. Okay, so you know, you got several more hours, and then you have the tornado watch down here in that area I just showed you right here on the radar. Okay, tornado watch up till 11 p.m. also Central Time. So it says a couple tornadoes are possible. So a few and a couple to me says that's a less of a chance. A few is more of a chance. I love the new kind of outlook they do here. You know, you got a couple tornadoes are possible, a few tornadoes are possible. Then it goes, I think a few tornadoes are likely, and then several tornadoes are likely. Then sometimes they have several strong tornadoes are likely. And I haven't seen anything over that, but hey, there's a chance of tornadoes. You're under a tornado watch in Oklahoma City, Stillwater, Norman, not quite up to Tulsa, but hey, things could really get downhill. They already kind of are over the next several hours, even more. But you know, there's not much point in showing short range models because this is happening right now. But explosive storms will continue. You do have a slight risk of severe thunderstorms for tomorrow. This is a pretty large one. I don't know if this will get upgraded to an enhanced risk. If it does, it'll be hail-driven, where some big-time hailstorms could get going here in Texas, especially tomorrow afternoon with an explosive environment again. But a slight risk that expands from central Texas all the way up to the Missouri, basically all the way to St. Louis, and everybody in between right in this region. Tornado threat, you got two areas, a bimodal 2% risk, one up here in Illinois, and I'll talk about that, and one down here. But you got more kinematics up here, less kinematics down here, better thermodynamics down here, and less up here. Thermodynamics is your surface temperatures, your dew points, your Kate values, things like that. Kinematics is that favorable wind pattern law. How much of a spin do you have in the atmosphere? And that typically is situated closer to the low pressure. Wind threat will be there, 15% risk of winds pushing 50 knots or higher. But the hail threat, you got a 15% risk of hail pushing 1 inch in diameter, and also a pretty large 10% hatch risk down here of hail pushing 2 inch in diameter or larger. And I think we're going to get some big hailstorms tomorrow in central and east central Texas for sure. And let's take a broader look at this. We'll start off tomorrow about 8 a.m. Central Time. Not much going on, and then I think right after lunchtime, big storms will get going. And I think the peak intensity of these storms will probably be late afternoon, early evening, and these storms will produce some big-time hail early on in the storm mode, and then I think they will consolidate and might get a little bit of a damaging wind threat. But you know, this is going to be some widespread storms and kind of east central Texas all the way through Arkansas, slow moving. You know, I could see a flooding risk materializing from this, as you don't have much forward motion with these storms. As low pressure really gets further up here, these storms get more of a tilt, so they kind of just train over the same area. So a lot of rain can fall fast in these regions. So don't just totally ignore the flooding threat, but you go all the way to Friday morning, these storms develop into a mesoscale convective system, basically a line of storms throughout the wee hours of the morning through southeast Texas, northern Louisiana, and eventually make it all the way into southwest Mississippi. And we'll talk about that here in a second. This looks like a pretty intense line of storms based off the latest long-range HRRR model, working its way through Louisiana to Friday morning. But a closer look at Texas with these storms, it can be quite explosive. And here they are, bang. Watch out the Dallas-Fort Worth area right around rush hour. Heading home from work around 5 p.m., big storms could get going south of Dallas, down to Austin, points east. These storms could produce very large hail, okay? And then they'll consolidate, and there's not much forward movement with it. They kind of consolidate in one area. I think there'll be a lot of outflow boundaries popping off tomorrow, and we'll talk a lot more about outflow boundaries. It's a fascinating thing. It's rain-cooled air. You can see it on radar sometimes. They happen almost every day in the Carolinas and the Southeast. And it's normally what basically you'll get a big storm that fires up. It pops off an outflow boundary, which is rain-cooled air from the storm. Sometimes it's totally circular, meaning it comes out from all areas of the storm. That boundary will fire up another storm, and it causes a chain reaction of storms. And this is almost what this kind of looks like to me tomorrow. We'll definitely see how this verifies, but a lot of times you can get just a huge mass of storms from these. So watch out basically in eastern Texas, all of eastern Texas, especially northeast Texas down to kind of this area of Texas around here. I know that's a lot of wording of Texas, but I'm sorry I'm not mentioning a lot of towns and communities. There's a ton of them. Texas is a pretty large. We all know that. But, one of the reasons why storms really get going because the Cape builds fast in Texas tomorrow. We'll go all the way out to about early afternoon. You got Cape values pushing 2,500 joules per kilogram. A lot of energy in the atmosphere. We'll go all the way out to about mid-afternoon. You got Cape values reaching well over 3,000 joules per kilogram in these areas, and then bang, these storms fire up, eat up. They literally eat up all this Cape. Watch how you got a lot of Cape right in here, and then the storms fire up and just yum, 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 yum. It's all gone. That's how it is. The atmosphere is wild, how similar it is, how you can compare it to other things in life. It's pretty, I know that don't make sense, but it's pretty wild. A lot of times people view the weather as such a hard thing to understand, but honestly, if you dumb it down, it's pretty simple at how it works. There's just so many huge words and terminology that makes it more complicated than what it actually is. And I try not to throw all them words at you, but basically all this is fuel. Think of this as gasoline in the atmosphere, okay? That's right here. And then someone lights a match to this, and then it burns up all that fuel. Okay, that's what you see right here. That's all them storms in that same general area. Pretty wild, huh? And then you got rain, cold air, and the temperatures drop. So, watch out tomorrow in this region, all right? And I wouldn't be surprised if they issue a 5% risk of a tornado up here tomorrow. Okay, we just got to see how much instability that builds with the morning rain. But if you live from, I would say Missouri up into western Illinois, watch out for these little storms. I would not be surprised one bit tomorrow afternoon, somewhere in this region, central Missouri to St. Louis, up to Peoria. Haven't said that town in a while, so hopefully I didn't jack it up. Maybe all the way up into Rockford. These storms might produce a quick spin up. Okay, you're lacking some thermodynamics, those higher temperatures, because cold front's trailing in very quick changing of air masses. But watch out for some spinners with these cells. It is certainly possible, but the definitely forward motion of these storms are much quicker. So, but I don't want to ignore this up here. And then we look into Friday. We got a slight risk of severe storms in southeast Texas and a section of Louisiana. Would not be surprised one bit if this gets pushed a little bit further eastward, but a marginal risk of severe storms even up to Memphis. And right now, the biggest threat is probably some damaging winds and some hail. Not much of a tornado threat with this. The climatic environment totally leaves the region. But starting off Friday, I think that you could potentially have a big-time area of storms waking up Friday morning, rushing through areas of southern Mississippi, Louisiana. We'll see how much this changes, and it certainly can. And, of course, we can only go out to about 1 p.m. And there's not much storm showing up down here. But I think what they're saying is they think more storms are going to refire right down in this region. So it's certainly possible. But we'll certainly watch this down here. But for now, we can only go out 48 hours. So we'll get you a better idea for the Friday kind of storm mode tomorrow. But there's some talks on the Carolinas and Virginia about a severe weather threat, but this system has, it has really sped up. Okay, so that means that a lot of this energy will fly over overnight, which is an unfavorable time of the day. And, we're at 18Z Saturday, which is around, around 1 p.m. Saturday afternoon. And all the energy's flying through the Carolinas and Virginia. And then I think some big-time storms could potentially get going in far southeast Virginia, eastern North Carolina, right as this system, all the energy begins to get out into the Atlantic Ocean. So, if you're in Raleigh, points east, Richmond, points east, down to the coastal regions, I think that you guys stand the best chance for some severe weather. South Carolina, I think you're just tucked too far to the west, if that makes sense. But there could be a line of storms that get going, sweeping through the Delmarva, eastern North Carolina, Virginia, maybe even New Jersey, sometime, Saturday evening. It's certainly possible. We look at the environmental players out there, and, the dew points rise quickly before the cold front sweeps through Saturday evening for everybody, and this will be the pattern-changing cold front. These aren't temperatures. These are dew points. So dew points rise into that 60s threshold that we talk about, so it gets very moist right before the energy comes through. So, you could certainly get some severe weather. You got the dew points, which is a thermodynamic and response. What kind of surface cape do you got? It builds in quick, right around 1,000 joules per kilogram on average in this region. So some energy that kind of gets going. So we'll give you a better update on this. But, I think maybe a day or two ago it was looking like maybe something could get going. But the Storm Prediction Center has done a great job sticking to its guns and not really issuing anything for Saturday. And I think it's doing a great job. So cool times coming. I can tell you in the short range for the South, this doesn't look too bad to me. A lot of people are just assuming we're going to have risk of frost and freeze way down south. That's not necessarily correct. Now, maybe from Tennessee points north, might be a little bit of a different story. But what I'm noticing on this cold front is it's kind of moderating a little bit temperature-wise. So we'll see what happens. If you look at your 10-day forecast on the Weather Channel app, which I'm not going to frown upon that, sometimes I look at it just to compare it with what models are saying. Next week for the South, it looks kind of like more of an early April kind of forecast. Highs in the 70s, lows maybe in the 40s, give or take 5 degrees depending on your geographical location. But this is the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, the 27th through the 3rd of May. So we're getting all the way into May. God, it's crazy, right? Below average temperatures are predicted, just not in super high confidence, but certainly here we are. And I'll be honest with you guys. I love warm weather, but I do not love July and August. I've always been big on right after the 4th of July, the rest of summer can just, eat my dust because I'm done with it after that. It gets so hot. It gets so hot here in Columbia, South Carolina. I call it the armpit of hell. I got it from my dad when I was a kid. Yeah, so if we can delay summer as much as possible, I'm cool with it. Literally. All right, but hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe out there in Oklahoma. There's some big storms ongoing, a lot of hail flying around, so hopefully no big-time tornado threat gets going in this region. God bless all y'all. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you in the morning.